haven't been out here in a little while, huh? This is such a small little plant. Obviously it's towards the north side, so it's not growing so huge. All right, well today we are going to be planting some bulbs that you could plant in the summer. So it's early September right now, we're approaching fall really. But you plant these bulbs in the summer and miraculously they grow up in the fall. They reach their maturity in the fall, which is pretty cool because you probably saw from some of our other episodes, oftentimes we're planting bulbs in the fall and then they come up in the springtime. That's usually typical. Now, there's only a select number of bulbs. Well, these are technically corms if I wanted to be more accurate. But this is our Crocus sativus. So this is not native here. These are highly coveted corms that are from Greece. I believe they're native to Greece. I'm going to show you them. And you could usually get a bunch for a fairly good price, but you may not recognize them, but this is where our saffron comes from. Saffron is, I believe, the most expensive herb in the world, next to vanilla. Vanilla is, I think, the second most. So saffron is the stigma, which is the female part of the flower. So it's that little red thread that comes out. There's also a stamen in there, which is the yellow part. And people will collect the petals and the stamen for dyes, but the stigma is what is collected for the spice. So I figured I would start planting some of these here in the gazebo, and I'll plant the rest down at the meadow house. And I have maybe 100 of them, and these are perennial. We're in like a zone 5, 6 now, so I found that most of them will come up, but you have to start collecting pretty much every day between October and November, depending on when the flowers start to come up. And you'll want to collect them when the flowers are still slightly closed, not maybe fully opened, but like just opening. So if they're fully closed, you're not going to be able to get to the stigma or the stamen, whatever you're collecting. But if they're kind of just opening to fully opened, then you'll be able to actually collect them a lot easier. Some folks will just pop the head off the flower. So they'll use their thumb and their forefinger and just like pop the head off of the flower and put them in a basket. And, you know, I have like collecting baskets that I'll use to like collect and dry the calendula. But in this case, you pick them, you want to have them not dewy. So you want to have them not necessarily during the height of the sun, but as the dew burns off, so that you're not working with like a wet flowers. But yeah, I mean, pretty much October and November, if you don't have snow, and we have been having snows later and later, sometimes not until January, so it makes collecting saffron that much easier. I'm going to mix a little bit of the bulb tone in. Typically, this corm will have all the nutrients that it needs in order to push out the flower, but this is just to give them a little push. You could put about a teaspoon in the hole, but if I'm planting a bunch of them, what I like to do is just take a handful and just kind of work it into the soil like this. And these crocuses will want, these are probably a little bit of arugulas, not arugulas, probably a little bit of radishes that are just coming up. So I've kind of obliterated those, but this is where I wanted to plant the saffron crocus. And typically you just want to go about 3 inches down. What I like about my hori-hori knife is it has these little notches in it in the back, and that would be approximately 3 inches right there. So what you'd want to do is just bear it like that, and you'll see there's a top to it and there's also a bottom. This one might not be as easy to show you, but you could see that some have roots on the bottom. So I would generally orient them like that, but as I shared when we did our bulb lawn, we kind of just toss the bulbs in and they find their way up. But then you'd want approximately 3 inches. I'm just going to eyeball it, but if you want to be really precise, then you could do that. And that's basically it. And then I'm going to have to be out here basically every October to November, every day, and just see what might be blooming, because you don't want them to go you really want to get them at the right time. And so you have to be a little bit more vigilant. And I think the problem is when I have them in the orchard, I have so many other plants that are growing in the orchard and they've gotten so big now that if you plant them under bushy plants, you may just really miss them. You'll want about 6 hours of sun per day for these. Bees are really busy on the borage over here. I got a close-up of one where he just was pollinating it and the flower fell off. And he fell off with the flower and he's still pollinating it. Okay, so I'm going to plant all this crocus in between this borage, which is great. It's a nice little underplanting. I can see that I have some seedlings growing up here too, so I'm going to try to avoid those. Consider that these crocuses are growing in fairly dry areas, so they're not going to need a tremendous amount of water, and if you water them too much, that's why they need a really well-draining soil mix. If you water them too much, they'll probably just rot, especially if you have like a wet fall or like early snows, then that could be a bit challenging for these. Plant over here by this ground cherry. I see some of my calendula coming up here. I think all this is calendula, and here's some ground cherries falling off. Oh, here's another squash. Yeah, this one has been much more prolific, and you can see that this is the south-facing light that comes in. Actually, because this is still so prolific, I'm gonna go over towards the tomatoes and plant the rest of these. And I could use the hori-hori knife, but this soil is so easy to work with. This is part of the Espoma's raised bed mix. So I'm just gonna work this in, this bulb tone in. And you wanna get them approximately 3 inches from one another. I would say 3 to 4 inches. They get about 4 to 5 inches high. And as I shared, like right when they're starting to bloom and open up, that's a really good time to collect them. Maybe late morning after the dew has blown off. Well, I got some tomatoes too, it looks like. Oh, there's one under here. Definitely some slugs have been eating them. I prefer to get them before the slugs and then just let them ripen in the house. This one definitely was eaten by a slug. Look at that. Some ants are on it. Well, I'll leave that for them. We have way too many tomatoes that we know what to do with. This one has also been eaten. All right, so as our other bulbs come in, we'll start to plant them. I'll probably plant the other half down at the meadow house a little later today. But in the meantime, I'm gonna get all of these squash and tomatoes into our kitchen so that we could process them. I've already made like so much gazpacho this year. It's been great on these hot days. All right, so today we're here down at the meadow home. It's a bit of an overcast day, but that's fine for me. I'm loving these fall days. And today we're gonna be planting some bulbs that actually, in my opinion, should have been planted in the summer, and they actually bloom in the fall. These are crocuses that bloom in the fall, but you should plant them in the summer. It's now at the end of September, and if you recall, just a few weeks ago, we were planting our saffron crocuses up around the gazebo garden. I planted a few down here as well and in the planters, but these are different kinds of crocuses, and you know, we rely on when the Netherlands can send them, and you could see that these are already raring to go. You see this little shoot coming up from this corm. So these are geophytes, which essentially means that they have a storage unit underground. And in this case, a lot of people call them bulbs. I will often call them bulbs as well, but they are truly corms. And this one is Crocus pulchellus, so you can see I got it from White Flower Farm. And then I have another one called Crocus speciosus, And I have a cultivated variety called Crocus speciosus albus, which of course is a white color. Otherwise, these are a bit more of a lavender purple shade. And these are autumn blooming bulbs, which is unusual because all the crocuses that I had planted up in the 80,000 bulb lawn, those you plant in the fall and they start to flower in the spring. Well, these are different. They're autumn flowering, and which is why you should probably try to get them to the ground earlier rather than later. And actually, I ordered a bunch of colchicums, which I wanted to show you, and they may still come in, but those are also some fall blooming bulbs, and I wanted to give you a different selection of fall blooming bulbs that you could plant. And again, those I would be, more akin to planting them in early September, in the summer months. And we'll see if they come in though. So this is the Pulchellus. I think this is the Pulchellus. Did I pick this out of the Pulchellus? We'll see how they look different from speciosus. And I'll throw a big word out there for you. I mean, I already threw out geophyte, I guess, but these are hysteranthus, which means that the flowering happens before they leaf out. So you can see that these are slightly smaller, these little speciosus. And Pulchellus means like pretty, or little beauty or something of that nature. So, and the interesting thing about speciosus is that these are both from around the Turkish area, Turkey, but the speciosus they recently discovered, maybe they just had a misnomer of it, but they recently discovered it in Bulgaria. And when I mean discovered and recently, it's like within the last 1 or 2 years. So that's pretty cool that you could find that. So what I'm gonna do is plant them. And because my idea was to plant many different types of crocuses in here, including the spring blooming crocuses, I think what I'm going to do is try to start in the middle and then work my way outwards, because I was going to underplant these with violets, and I was thinking about doing the same here, but I thought, what, let this just be the crocus bed, and then that way I'll have crocuses coming up in the fall and the springtime. So what I'll be doing is I'm just going to add. These have everything they need in order to emerge. As you can see, they're already emerging, but I'm just gonna add some bulb tone in here, just kind of on, and then I'll work it in. But this will give me an idea as to where I'm gonna be planting them. You could either put like a teaspoon in the hole, and these do not have to go down far. Typically it's 2 to 3 times the length of the bulb, so that's not very much. And you could actually bury this. It will find its way up. So I'm just going to mix both the Pulchellus and the speciosus together. I'll put the whites with the purples and whatnot. But this will be exciting because I'm planning on these coming up sooner rather than later. And they look like they're kind of ready to go because the saffron crocuses that I planted earlier, they typically for me here will start blooming in the late fall, like November. These look like they're ready to go in like a few weeks, couple weeks. Look, I got a couple of these that have like 2 heads. Look at these. So those are just, they look like claws, don't they? Pretty crazy. So these are the type of corms that you could just toss in a couple. And when we were planting in the 80,000 bulb lawn, they weren't really emerging quite yet, because if you recall, that was like in September, October. I think it was October when we were planting them. So they just weren't ready. They're not going to come up until spring. But as I shared, these are probably going to come up in like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks is my guess. So I'm just going to plant them in here, and I might drop 2 in there. These ones with 2 heads, I might as well just do 1 of those. And I'm trying to get them, 2 to 3 inches down. And you'll see, like, sometimes I'll just let their little shoot come up. But that's why I'm planting them in the middle, because I don't want to have to walk into this bed again and then crack off the top of the shoot. And then,
So if there's 2, will there be 2 plants coming up?
Yeah, there should be 2 plants. And then the way that they will reproduce is that they will produce like viable seed, and they could seed that way. But also what happens is they start to split. So these corms will become 2 corms or 3 corms or 4 corms. So that's probably what's happening here. Eventually this will be multiple corms, and so they spread that way, asexually, and then sexually by creating seeds and cross-pollination and then creating seeds. And this will be great. We'll do the fall ones in here, and then as we get the other crocuses coming in, which should be coming in within the next week, we'll do the spring blooming crocuses, and we could kind of line them along the edges. And I definitely have enough of those to probably fill this entire bed. I wouldn't say I went overboard, but I feel like I just have just enough. We'll be sharing how the gardens and wildscaped areas mature as the seasons progress, so if you enjoy videos like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notifications button to help us grow and share these videos to more folks. In the meantime, we'll be cracking away at more of the gardens and renovations here at Flock. We'll see you in the next video.